Welcome to the Strategy Doctor podcast with me, Mark Anthony Peterson. This podcast is the performance-enhancing drug for your company's bottom line. Today's show is the first of an 8-part series, a mini MBA, with my guest, Philip Williams of AskPhilipWilliams.com. Now, the shows may not run sequentially, so you might need to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the podcast on iTunes or Speaker, SPREAKER.com, and search for The Strategy Doctor or search by my name, Mark Anthony Peterson. Now, a little bit more about the guest. Philip Williams, and that's Philip with one L, is a super consultant like me. He took a 17-year-old cash-strapped company and grew it at 50% per year for 5 years. Now he's on the podcast as the Dean of the Strategy Doctor School of Business, and he's going to help you get your Guerrillapreneur MBA. Today's show is the first part of a 2-part series that asks all you business owners, are you solving the right business problem? Now here's that interview. Guys, welcome to the show today. We have an entrepreneur extraordinaire. He is the 3-time Inc. 5000 honoree after becoming the CEO of a 17-year-old cash-strapped company and growing it at 50% per year for 5 years. That resulted in 2 nearly simultaneous acquisition offers from 2 publicly traded multinational companies. He has accomplished this all by bootstrapping the business, no outside money. Mr. Philip Williams has had this entrepreneurial executive drive since he was 8 years old. And he joins us today on the podcast to ask CEOs and startup executives, are you solving the right problem? Mr. Williams, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've had this passion for solving business problems since you were 8 years old.
It's very interesting. I'm the child of a serial entrepreneur, if you will, and my dad owned several businesses when I was growing up. My mom owned one, and so I started learning about small businesses at the family dinner table. You know, I vividly remember my parents having conversations about whether or not they should raise prices or maybe how a customer service event wasn't handled well during the day and things of that nature. So it was just part of the fabric of my life, if you will, as I was growing up. And I just became so interested in how things operate in a small business. But my dad didn't want, he owned barbershops and he owned actually an auto salvage yard. He didn't want his sons to actually be barbers because I don't know if you know this or not, but cutting hair 8-10 hours a day is a physically very difficult thing to do. And so he encouraged both of his sons to go out and get education as much as we could. And so I did that. I went all the way through an MBA and got a mechanical engineering degree, all kinds of stuff like that. But I just kind of found myself coming back to it, if you will.
I've spent a little bit of time around barbershops. And the barbershop business is a terrific business, especially from a Guerrillapreneur perspective. If you have an extra seat or seats that you can lease to other barbers to cover the overhead expenses, man, you throw a lot of cash to the bottom line. This low overhead, high cash business model must have seeped into your blood. And having both parents as entrepreneurs, that must have been special too. Is that what motivated you to do what you do? Because most small businesses fail before their 10th year in business.
You know, that's exactly right, Mark. You look at it, and I was very fortunate. You know, my dad's primary business ran for, I want to say it was, he owned it for over 3 decades before he finally sold it. And interestingly enough, He probably never spent more than $50 a month in advertising. All of his advertising was essentially word of mouth. And there were so many things that he did very, very well. And as I watched what he did, it became super apparent to me when he sold the business what some of the problems were. And, you talk about how most businesses don't make it to their 10th year. In January of 2017, I believe it was, Harvard Business Review published an article, and in there was a statistic that 87% of businesses solved the wrong problem. And I started looking at that, and I thought, that seems pretty interesting. So if you were to go to Google and say, and just type in, why do businesses fail? On the front page, you're going to get 80 to 100 results. But if you go through there and you start looking, everything from cash flow and can't get clients and my employees, don't have work ethic and, all kinds of different things, you can literally boil that down to a place where, you're working on the wrong problem. And you almost feel like you're playing whack-a-mole.
Right.
It's an HR problem, and then it's a cash flow problem. And so how do you figure out how to solve the right problem? And as I looked at it, it became apparent to me that a lot of companies don't solve the right problem. How do they fall into that? Well, many companies start because in the very beginning, the founder is fortunate enough to have a solution that works for several people at the beginning of the business. And they get a little bit of momentum and they get started, but they unfortunately fall in love with that solution. And over time, your clients evolve, the market evolves, and competition comes into the market, and they exert pressure on the market, and so things change. And that's how you fall into this situation where you're not solving the right problem.
Let me unpack this a little. As you solve the initial problem, the market evolves, and a new problem emerges. And many companies, especially startups and small businesses, never evolve and face the new challenge. They keep solving the same old problem.
That is absolutely one of the truisms. It's the Blockbuster versus Netflix.
Right.
Hate to beat that one. Don't want to beat that one too much, but that is really what it is. Blockbuster missed the mark on it. Netflix should have a competitor in the marketplace today, or they should be owned by Blockbuster because they had that opportunity. But they missed how the rest of us were looking to, pick up our remote control from the couch and watch a movie. So if you're not paying attention to your client, and if you're not paying attention to how your employees do what they do, then you're going to find yourself in a spot before your business is 10 years old where you're solving the wrong problem. And I thought that was very interesting because, you talk about that statistic. If you can look at different surveys year in and year out, and it's always somewhere between 80 and 90% of businesses don't make it to their 10th year. And so when I saw that statistic about 87% of businesses solving the wrong problem, it just sort of hit me between the eyes.
I want to drill down on Blockbuster and Netflix. That's fascinating to me that Blockbuster was the giant. They were the Goliath and Netflix was the David. There was a Blockbuster in every major and minor city in America. At its peak, Blockbuster had about 9,000 stores. These guys thought they were evolving. They started with VHS tapes and evolved to higher quality offerings when they launched DVDs. I can remember going to their storefronts every Friday and getting 4 or 5 movies. I would never have guessed that those guys would disappear. Walk us through where you think they went wrong. How could they be solving the problem one day and then let a startup completely disrupt their market?
It is a classic situation that happens over and over again. There, you can go back and find interviews of Sears executives where, I believe it was one of the major publications, and I don't know which one, but they were interviewing a Sears executive, and they say, "Hey, didn't you guys see Walmart coming?" And the answer is, "Yes, we saw them coming." Well, why didn't you do something about it? Well, we didn't think those guys knew anything about how to run a massive retail operation. They disrespected the competition. But the bigger problem is that they didn't pay attention to really what their clients were looking for. And if you don't pay attention to that, that is where the vast majority of the information is going to come from when it comes to how do you build your business. You need to be willing to look internally at what is going on with your business and what your clients want. And if you're paying attention to what they want, then you will be able to grow your business. But the trick of it is, it's actually two sides of the same coin. It's not necessarily what the client wants. It's what problem the client has that isn't being solved. I use the example where I bought a 1990 Toyota truck brand new. And I could have gotten the complete set of features that I bought in that Toyota. I could have purchased in a Chevrolet truck. But the Toyota had a cup holder. And that was something that was really, really important to me. I'm down here in Arizona. I need an ice cold drink everywhere I go, pretty much 9 months out of the year.
Right.
And so, what Blockbuster missed was telegraphed really by Steve Case and America Online way back in the late 90s when Steve Case decided to go out and buy Time Warner. Mm-hmm. And one of the driving factors for America Online buying Time Warner was they wanted access to the content library because they had intended to stream it through everybody's home. So Blockbuster should have seen what so many other people saw. Clearly, America Online saw it, Time Warner saw it, Netflix saw it. Streaming content through everybody's home was something that was a conversation that was going on almost everywhere. We were all looking for it. It was just a matter of who was going to deliver it and when they were going to deliver it. Because the problem is, as you say, Mark, you get home, it's a long week. How does Blockbuster miss it? I don't know. On a Friday night, your life pattern was, hey, I'm going to stop, I'm going to pick up a pizza, and I'm going to stop by Blockbuster and pick up 2 or 3 movies for the weekend, and I'm going to come home. Well, what Netflix was offering you was, hey, we're going to take one more stop out of your day, and we're going to give it to you at exactly the moment that you want it. And it was all about convenience. I'm not sure how Blockbuster misses that. And Blockbuster, they missed 2 or 3 opportunities to buy Netflix. They were literally offered the opportunity to purchase that company and said no thank you.
Isn't that shocking?
It blows my mind. It blows my mind. But it goes back to not paying attention to, I call it white space, the problem that your client has that nobody is solving. Bob Lutz is another great one. When he got to General Motors, he moved over from Chrysler. If you don't know who Bob Lutz is, he is the guy that created the Plymouth Prowler. He is the guy that ushered in the PT Cruiser design, great at developing products. And he got over to General Motors, and when he got there, he wanted to know who was responsible for launching the Pontiac Aztek because it was the ugliest thing that anybody had ever sold in a car company ever. And he talks about, he sent out a memo within days of arriving at General Motors. And it was very interesting because the Pontiac Aztek was launched and it was the first vehicle to ever hit 100% of the marks of the things that the clients in the focus group told General Motors they wanted. And so General Motors was listening to what do clients want, and they built what clients want. And what clients wanted turned out to be one of the ugliest, biggest automotive failures ever, and it became the Pontiac Aztek. And Lutz sent out a memo. He says, you cannot base what you're building on what clients tell you they want. You have to listen to their pain points. If you're listening to their pain points, you will be able to evolve your business in a way that allows it to grow.
That makes complete sense, and I hope the Guerrillapreneurs understand this distinction. At the end of each show, I say, if you're not breaking something, your company's going to be the next thing that gets broken. And that distinction between wants and pain points is a critical one, because a pain point can be monetized. something that I want, if you're asking me and I am not tasked with paying for it, I'll give you a laundry list of those things. So I see exactly where you're going in terms of focusing the business enterprise around constantly solving a pain point that is critical to that industry. And in the Blockbuster case, it sounds like you're saying, and I totally agree with it, convenience is the area of competition that the customer is willing to reward with dollars. And it started with movie theaters and Blockbuster providing a more convenient model for them to consume content, but it's not where the consumer wanted to end. And so the next convenience disruptive model was Netflix. And even Netflix has evolved from mailing you DVDs and CDs and other content to streaming it, as you said. So they've continued to push along that continuum, making it more convenient and growing their business model as a result. So yeah, I that distinction to me that's a critical nugget.
And one of the things that you have to realize is that no two clients will express their frustration or their pain point in the same way. You know, when I got to Hydro Geophysics, we were looking for a way to grow revenue, and we had a few clients that had the same problem, could be solved with the same tool, but they weren't speaking the same language. In fact, they were actually in different industries, but they had the same problem. And you almost have to be able to read the tea leaves, and you have to, get some yellow stickies out and write down things that they say and stick them on a whiteboard and just accumulate those over a few months. And when you start to do that, it will paint a picture for you, and you can start looking. You say, okay, well, what solves this group of pains, and what solves that group of pains? And what I did was I started looking, and I said, what these clients need is, they need a data acquisition system that will collect a lot of data very quickly, but they need it at a low cost, because nobody wants to pay to have an environmental problem monitored. I mean, that's a multi-decade problem. So, how do you get it down cheap? But they weren't saying that. In fact, the business that I was in, clients didn't even want to talk about it. They did not want to talk about environmental problems. If you look at your utility company's financials at the end of the year, there's no such thing as reserves for future unknown environmental problems. That would scare investors to death, right?
Right.
So they were very veiled in how they expressed their problem, and no two clients talked about it in the same way. So you have to be accumulating their sentences and their statements and looking at them and say, okay, what does this look like? What is this thing that they're describing? What would it look like? And the next step that we did was I went out into the market and I looked and I said, okay, well, who sells something that will do that? And it came back, and this absolutely blew my mind. Just the hardware alone was going to be almost $500,000.
Wow. And
I just could not believe that in that time, in today's world, that kind of technology would cost that kind of money. And on top of that, it would only give us one data set a day, and I wanted like a data set every 15 minutes. So I just refused to accept that the solution that was available was actually the penultimate thing that could be achieved at the time. And so that's part of it too, is you have to refuse, you almost have to reject. There's going to be an existing solution in the market once you identify your client's problem. The question is that actually going to get it done? And I can tell you right now, our clients would not have paid that kind of money for the equipment and then all of the monitoring and everything on top. So you have to get very in tune to how they talk about their problem and realize that they may not describe it very clearly. And then, as you say, Mark, that pain point, people will pay for pain. They'll pay to get rid of pain. They will not pay to receive joy.
Right.
And so you have to ask them. If I could solve that, and this is this is the kind of the litmus test. If I could solve that for you, what's it worth? Well, I don't think we have any budget for that. Or they might come back and they might say, If you could solve that, we'd probably give you a national holiday inside our company.
Right.
And that's a big, huge indicator.
So that's when you start to know that you're fixing the right problem, right? When they start building the floats and they start getting the parade ready, if you solve that problem, because you would have unlocked some real value for them. Solving the problem multiplies the value that they can bring to the bottom line, and so paying your bill is well worth the effort for them. And at that point, I would imagine.
Absolutely. The trick is, remember, they're not going to say to you, my problem is XYZ. They're going to describe it totally differently.
So for the companies that don't make it to that 10th year, what are some of the problems? Why are they unable to get that deep into the customer's issues to understand that pain point and reward their business with solving it? What are some of those self-inflicted wounds?
Well, some of them are, as an example, falling in love with your solution, your own solution, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with the thing that got you into business, but the problem is the market changed on you. So if you find yourself so in love with your solution and you keep asking the question, why won't anybody buy this? Then it's one of two things. Either it's not solving the right problem, or you're marketing it in the wrong way. So solving the wrong problem might actually be the way you're marketing it. Remember, the guy that created the zipper died penniless because he wasn't marketing it correctly.
Right.
A lot of people don't know this, but Kleenex, sometimes it can be marketing message. Kleenexes were originally launched as a product that was designed to help women remove their makeup at the end of the day. Within 24 months, that product was relaunched as a disposable handkerchief because within a very short period of time, Kleenex found out that ladies were not just using it for removing makeup, but gentlemen and ladies were using it as a means of blowing their nose. And so, you could have a marketing message mismatch. That might be a problem that you have. The other thing is blind spots. We all, as individuals, we have strengths and weaknesses. And, it's if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail thing. You have to have a way of identifying your own personal blind spots, your own personal preferences, because you might enjoy solving certain kinds of problems inside your business. Like for me, as an example, I come from the operations side of a business. Typically, a CEO is going to grow up in either sales, operations, or finance. And so I love operations. I know that one of my personal weaknesses is cold calls. I can close a sale at that point. We get that deep into the conversation, I'm very comfortable. But if I had to make a living as a door-to-door salesman knocking on cold doors, I would starve to death. So one of the things that I do is I backfill myself with a good salesperson who can go out and break those initial doors open for the business.
Guys, this concludes the first of 8 shows with Philip Williams of AskPhilipWilliams.com. In the next episode, Philip will finalize the lesson on how you ask the right business question. Think you missed an episode? Then download the show from the show page or go to iTunes or Spreaker. Search using the Strategy Doctor podcast or my name, Mark Anthony Peterson. Want to learn more about Philip Williams? Look for him at AskPhilipWilliams.com, and that's Philip with one L and Williams plural with an S, or follow him on Twitter at AskPhilip with one L lowercase w. This has been the Strategy Doctor podcast, the performance enhancing drug for your company's bottom line.